friends, welcome to Church Online. And as we move further into this season of Easter, may the Spirit of the risen Christ be with you all. Let us acknowledge the country on which we meet. We acknowledge the Bidjigal people of the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay respect to elders, past, present and emerging, and to any who are watching this church online.
So welcome everyone again to Revesby Uniting Church online services. We hope you enjoyed if you joined us for our Easter suite of services. We hope you found that to be a thought-provoking time. As we move now past Easter into our services, next week is April 26th, Anzac Day, and we're going to have a special Anzac service next week, so make sure you join us for that 9:30 next Sunday. If you'd like to support our church financially, and we'd very much like you to do that, you can find information about that on our website, www.revesbyuniting.org. There's all the information there about you being able to set up direct debit to us with any amount that you'd like to give us to support us in continuing this ministry. Also like to take this opportunity to remind you of our Tuesday catch-ups. That's an email that comes into your email service every week. If you'd like to be part of that, you'll find the link on our website. Simply click on the link and to join our MailChimp group and put your email address in there. Every Thursday we're having Bible studies using Zoom. And as I've mentioned before, if you know all about that, great. Send an email to info@revesbyuniting.org and we'll send you the link. If you have no idea what that means, then again, write to info@revesbyuniting.org and we'll contact you and walk you through that process.
Now we will move to our call to worship. From the corners of the world, the confusion of life, and the loneliness of our hearts.
Gather us now, loving God.
To feed our minds, fire our imagination and set our hearts free.
Gather us now, living God.
To think anew, dream afresh and journey onwards together.
Meet us here, great God.
As we move further into the season of Easter, we encounter Thomas, the one who proclaimed that he would not believe in the resurrection unless he touched the mark of the nails in Jesus' body. Many people call him Doubting Thomas. And certainly there are important things to reflect on about doubt. It has a part in our faith tradition. So this morning we will go on a journey with Thomas. I'd like to share two poems before we hear the gospel reading about Thomas, and they point out that doubt is on a spectrum. It can be necessary and helpful, but at the other end of that spectrum it can be problematic. So let me share two poems with you. Firstly, when doubt is important. I'd like to read a poem by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai. He was born in Germany in the early 20th century. His family migrated to Palestine in 1936, and he fought in the Israeli War of Independence in 1947 to 49. Later in life, however, he became interested in reconciliation between Jew and Palestinian. And in a world of hard and stubborn views, that don't seem to be able to find common ground, this poem is poignant. From the place where we are right, flowers will never bloom in the spring. The place where we are right is hard, trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plough. And a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. Doubts and loves will dig up the world, will make the hard, trampled yard open up, more malleable, open to different perspectives, especially as we remember the context from which this poem came. It's very powerful. Doubt is fundamentally important. Moving to another poem, which looks at what happens at the other end of the spectrum where all there is doubt. It's a poem by John O'Donoghue. He was an Irish Catholic priest. Try as best you can not to let the wire brush of doubt scrape from your heart all sense of yourself and your hesitant light. If you remain, generous time will come good, and you will find your feet again on fresh pastures of promise, where the air will be kind and blushed with beginning. Don't let the wire brush of doubt scrape from your heart your sense of self and your hesitant light. There, beautifully expressed, is a cautionary word about doubt.
A reading from John's Gospel. Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus appeared. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, the disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." In this is the gospel of Christ.
So, we meet Thomas again. Let's explore a little more about this intriguing character. I myself have a history with the disciple Thomas. For many years of my life, he was in my corner, urging me on, helping me in my discussions, arguments and battles with Christians of a more conservative persuasion. Thomas helped me to doubt what they said. Now, like many heroes, if they're used too often, they become a bit one-dimensional. Thomas became that way for me. One-dimensional and strong, but nonetheless one-dimensional. I was aware of the limitations of my view of Thomas, but didn't really want to think about it too much, at least for a while. Then, some years later, in my master's degree, I wrote a very long essay about this chapter in John's Gospel, chapter 20. And as in all good study, you have to engage the text very carefully. Try not to bring your own presuppositions to it. And in my reading, I had to listen to other perspectives about Thomas, some of which didn't see him as such a hero. So I've changed my view about Thomas. I still believe doubt is important. Let me go further. It is essential in the life of faith. It stops us from becoming hard and trampled like a yard, as the image in the poem had it. Doubt can also be limiting. Without a context, without other companions, it can become something of a monster. Doubt, oddly, can become a form of fundamentalism and is as dull and lifeless as all fundamentalisms are. So, with a more nuanced view about doubt, let's look at the text. What the text describes is Thomas on a trajectory of change. He is moving from one view or position to another. And he ends up at a point of profound insight when he says, "My Lord and my God." And by the way, that is one of the most profound acclamations of faith in the whole of John's Gospel. It also has political overtones. The Emperor Diocletian, who ruled from AD 81 to 96, revived the cult of emperor worship and styled himself as Lord and God. So when Thomas proclaims Jesus, "My Lord and my God," he's actually making a political claim apart from a more standard faith claim. He's dethroning Diocletian. What an extraordinary journey Thomas went on. Most of the time, we are more comfortable with holding positions, defining belief as saying, "I believe in these things." It's not comfortable to leave some of that behind. In fact, at the time, it feels a bit like losing your faith. But if we follow Thomas, we leave something behind so we can engage and perhaps adhere to something deeper, broader, more life-giving. So I want to put to you that faith might be better thought of as a verb, faithing. It's not something we have, not a noun, it's something we do, something we journey with. So faithing includes starting at doubt and moving all the way to a new and revealing insight. It's all of it. And Thomas is a wonderful role model of that. So let's rename Thomas not Doubting Thomas, but Faithing Thomas. Let's delve a little deeper into how Thomas moved from one place to another. In the reading we hear that Jesus said to Thomas, "Reach out your hand, put it in my side." The Greek that we translate as reach out is literally throw. So the instruction might be throw your hand into my side. It's a very unnerving command. And as one commentator I was reading during the week posited, did Jesus wince when Thomas followed his command and threw his hand into his side? It was a raw, immediate, painful connection for both Thomas and Jesus. I think we can say it was the immediacy of this connection that allowed Thomas to move from doubt to a new understanding. We normally think of the resurrection as something finished, beautiful, glorious. If you take a moment to picture Jesus resurrected, or some artworks you may have seen, it's a lovely, powerful image in most cases. But John is alerting us to the sense that even the resurrected Jesus was incomplete, needing healing. A wound was still open. Perhaps it never would be healed. It would be something that had to be lived with. So Thomas touches that vital sense of incompleteness. And it's not a belief, it's an immediate experience. It's something happening down here through the avenue of touching a wound. It was that led Thomas to new insight, not a rearrangement of the thoughts in his head, but something that happened at a visceral, literally visceral level. Well, what about us? We can't touch the risen Christ. Interestingly, Jesus says to Thomas straight after his moment of insight, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." That's you and me. We have not seen. How might we go on Thomas's journey and touch something that allows us to move more closely into the divine mystery? I'd like to answer this question in a roundabout way. If you cast your mind back to the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, you'll recall that it was all about the good news of the kingdom. Join in, turn around, the kingdom's here. It's bountiful, it's happening, and it flourished. People were welcomed, there were healings. Thousands of people were fed. People learnt things they hadn't comprehended before. It was so broad. But then in the lead up to Easter, as we reflected on several weeks ago, that broad kingdom narrows down to just one person, Jesus. At the end, he's the only one who bears connection with the kingdom. Everyone else has lost enthusiasm, or in the case of the disciples, they have deserted him. And the resurrection, of course, is focused on one person, Jesus. So it seems the focus has narrowed down and it has stayed there. Or has it? We get a hint in Matthew's Gospel that there's more to it. In his account of the crucifixion, he notes that when Jesus died, there was an earthquake and tombs were split apart and saints came back to life and appeared to many. The resurrection is not just Jesus. It's including others as well. How might we reflect on that? I see it this way, that the resurrection has liberated forces of life and hope everywhere, and they're alive in the world today. We as followers of Jesus see that through the prism of Jesus, but we shouldn't limit our sight to Jesus. His resurrection invites us to see resurrection everywhere. So, where do you see it? Especially in this pandemic-ridden world. I heard a story yesterday which spoke to me about this. There's an Australian academic living in Barcelona, in Spain, and you will know Spain has suffered grievously through this pandemic. He was isolated like everyone else, but he decided that he would help by registering with a pharmacy and taking deliveries of prescriptions to people who were unable to get to the pharmacy themselves. So he was entombed in his home, but he broke out and in compassion for others is literally spreading the possibility of life. Resurrection is alive now. And then Thomas's question, whenever you see that, how might you actually touch it, feel something of its immediacy, rawness, and vitality? To summarise, doubt is essential in the journey of faith. It is part of faithing. We're invited to leave behind fortified positions of belief, to venture into new insights. And one of the best ways we can do that today is to look for signs of new life and do the best we can to touch them, to feel their power, and to continue in our journey. As Jesus said, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Amen. Some questions you might like to reflect on. Where do you see signs of resurrection in the world today? How might you touch them? Secondly, recall an experience of doubt. What helped you such that that experience led to new insight? Recall such a moment, I invite you, and reflect on it.
Easter is over, and as the quiet days pass in this waiting, watching world, we come together in prayer. Lord, this is a hard time for so many. You know our struggles and strengths, our longings and hopes, the ways we move between doubt and faith. We remember Thomas with the other disciples a week after the terror and grief of the cross. "Unless I see," he said, just like we might say if we dared to voice our uncertainty. Jesus, you are with us where it hurts, in mercy, tenderness, and wincing truth. Refresh, strengthen, and encourage us. Although the world we knew seems to have stopped, locked down for now, our routines broken and cars garaged, we continue to journey with you, moving into what may surprise and shape us. We pray for each other. Comfort us when we are anxious, lonely, facing health issues or sorrow. We think of children and young people studying and playing at home, and of the parents, carers and teachers who support them day by day. Sustain all those who are working to protect lives during the pandemic. May our leaders be open to wisdom and share a vision to seek the best for all people. May this time be marked by compassion and kindness. We choose to be a part of that through our words and acts and relationships, and in our ongoing journey with you. Amen.
Friends, go now in peace. The powers of life are swirling around us. Touch them. Feel their power and rawness. Go in peace. Amen.